Halloween Horror Nights 28 was billed as the biggest year of the event yet, with 10 houses, 5 scare zones, and one show. Let's take a look at the 28th version of the event, which ran for 37 nights from September 14th to November 3rd.
True fear comes from within.
Announcements this year came thick and fast leading up to the event, with an 80s theme that was not originally planned but just kinda happened based upon what IPs they were using for the year. While originally playing up to the 80s theme throughout and no icon, the event was described as time twists and turns on itself, ripping cinematic greats, cult classics, and original nightmares from the decades past into a new era of fear. This year, the tagline was really pushing the more houses than ever aspect, with the jump from 9 houses to 10. Before we jump into the houses though, we're going to talk about the scare zones. Horror Nights have tried many things throughout the streets over the years, with roaming hordes, scare zones, all with one IP and big elaborate sets, and it seems in the last few years they found a formula and stuck with it ever since Halloween Horror Nights 25.
I am Blake Braswell. I am a show director for the Scare Zones for Halloween Horror Nights, and I have been for the last couple of years.
The streets have been designed and created by a team led by show director Blake Braswell since Horror Nights 26. This year featured 2 chainsaw hordes throughout the park. The Carnival Chainsaw Group by Simpsons, who are always a lot of fun to watch and always did a great job. The second was outside Fast and Furious, a location which had originally housed a scare zone in the previous years. On entrance to the park, the Harvest was an odd mix of a zone. An old barn held horrors from each house. Foul creatures lurked behind the hay bales, ready for the harvest of blood and screams. This zone featured barn walls around the outside and scarecrow-style actors and hay bales inside. The walls of the barn were decorated with objects and images from each IP haunted house at the event. It was actually pretty great this year that they added some theming to the Harvest Scare Zone with the barn walls. They clearly looked at the feedback from Horror Nights 27's Altar of Horror Zone, which had nothing other than the signs for the houses. The scare actors in this zone did a great job of blending into the walls, and the stilt walkers were a great welcome to the event. Second was Vamp 85, New Year's Eve. Before the countdown to midnight had started, it was clear this party had already been crashed, and the streets were running red with blood.
Hey buddy, you want to buy a mixtape? Yeah? Alright, cool, I'll catch you later in the party. Happy New Year.
A seemingly typical New Year's Eve bash, as the ball drops, vampires started their feeding frenzy. This zone was a sequel to Vamp 55 from Horror Nights 26. A fun zone, and the scare actors really made this zone come alive. Or, well, you could say dead, I guess. Though it felt like at some times something inside this zone was missing. It had a great party atmosphere, music, and the inclusion of a show. First, there were a ton of actors in this zone, both partygoers and vampires, and each with great costumes and makeup. A fun place to grab a drink and enjoy the music and shows, at least once anyway. My biggest issue with this zone was the show, and while it was fun, it needed some variety to the soundtrack each time. They used so many great songs for the zone, but every show used the exact same song every single time. If you spent any amount of time inside the zone, you would have seen one of the 2 different dance shows every time you were there. This zone really could have been elevated to one of the best if they had a different song play each time for the countdown. For the size of the zone, also, there was just not enough props throughout. You had the impressive stage, the news reporter van, and the band stage, and that was really all. Even just a return of the window projections would have improved this area. A great atmosphere zone though, but it just needed a little more bite.
I looked at the top 40 for 1984. It's amazing. Like, if you're gonna make an 80s movie and you're like, I'm just gonna pull the most iconic stuff I can, like so much of it, Karma Chameleon, Thriller, all these things, they're like right there in the middle of this time. It's perfect. And so then I like my theater director brain went on and went, well, there's no songs that aren't from anything past, December 31st, 1984. It's all got to be set like within this time is what we're going to play with. And the soundtracks is fantastic.
Twisted Traditions was a good dark classic Central Park zone with the pumpkins in the trees, of course. Traveling through Central Park and an ancient evil had been awakened. The story of that impressive church outside was that it had been opened and released this ancient evil, out transforming Halloween into an abomination, with rotted pumpkins fused with decaying human flesh. That's why there was a jock or a cheerleader and more walking around outside the church, as they had been the ones involved in opening it. The church itself looked amazing and the creatures within were unique. This year was at times so busy though that it could be difficult to walk through this zone and appreciate the details within. The first of the final 2 scare zones which were announced together was Killer Klownz from Outer Space. This zone was in a brand new area, due to the use of the new cinematic projectors used within it. While small, it did fit in this area quite well. As you entered their domain, the smell of cotton candy hides the fact this area is all trick and no treat. The Interstellar Circus tent has landed and the joke was on us. The use of projections from the movie was great, and it's really elevated this zone in this small location. The props for the space were also great, with the cotton candy cocoons. The clowns looked and acted exactly like they did in the movie, and the soundtrack was used to full effect here. Some people are calling this the greatest scare zone ever created. While it was a lot of fun, this is one zone I really hope turns into a full-blown house in the future, to take full use of this IP. I will actually be really surprised if this does not come back as a house.
On Scare Zones, Blake, to talk us through a little bit about Killer Klownz as a scare zone, and that we're actually placing it in an area that's different than we've done before.
Right. At first, when you said something to me, I was a little apprehensive because I in my brain I was trying to figure out how much stuff really happened out in the street, and it'd been a while since I've seen the movie, and actually
a ton.
It's a ton. It's like most of that film takes place out in the street. Yeah. Only a little bit of it in their actual spaceship.
Finally, Revenge of Chucky, located on the streets of Hollywood. The world's most deadliest doll was back after 30 years of mayhem, creating chaos in the streets during a toy fair that had turned lethal. Chucky had twisted the playthings into new nightmares and taken over the factory workers themselves, commanding his minions to carve up horror among unsuspecting victims.
Hey, wait, who's the one in the pink over here with the center? Your right hand goes to the sky, and it doesn't leave until he finishes.
It wasn't until after the second week of the event that this zone had its complete props out, and was one of the best of the year.
Are you recording this? What's wrong with you? Get me down!
Each offering a dark twist on children's classics and some of the most unsettling characters featured within. Other than the outstanding actors, the highlight of this zone though was Chucky himself, interacting with guests throughout the night in puppet form. Did you join the cult of Chucky while you were here and help him on his gruesome mission?
You are now part of my army. Now go and do my bidding. What are you standing around for? Get out of here!
The scare zones overall were definitely better than the previous year, but definitely some felt lacking prop-wise. With the daytime parade and regular guest use during the day, it can be hard to decorate the streets, and the biggest issues comes down to the now crowds visiting the event. This year was so busy throughout the whole event that at times it makes it difficult to walk through or be scared in some of the zones, and one prop or show would cause a huge bottleneck when trying to get past. What is the fix for this? Well, we'll have to see what awaits next year at Halloween Horror Nights 29, but I'm sure the feedback this year will indicate the crowd levels were an issue this year. This year though, early on in the announcement, Universal stated there would be 9 houses and 2 shows. This was later changed to 10 houses and 1 show. With Bill and Ted not returning and its replacement facing issues, did having only 1 show for the first time ever really affect the event? Yes. Let's talk about that 1 show though. Academy of Villians, a talented group of performers who've been at the event since 2016. The previous 2 years of the show were a lot of fun, featuring horror-themed performances with a lot of variety. This year though, the show was just not as fun for me, and also had some issues. First, the venue. While it was adapted to fit the show, it really didn't work. One of the best parts in the previous 2 years was being able to just walk past or hear in the show as you walked around the area, and then choosing to go and stand up and watch it and join in. This year, everyone is just kinda sat there, and while they try to get the crowd to interact, it just doesn't really happen. The next issue with the venue is the built-up set. You really can't see anything going on from the sides of the arena. You can't even see the screen, so you have no idea what the story is because most of it is being told on the screen, and whenever they dance towards the back of the stage, you can't see anything anyway. Speaking of the story though, it's kinda hard to understand anyway when viewing, and when you do, it just isn't that great. Cyberpunk featured a battle between two sides for control of a mainframe. At least I think it does anyway. The effects and lighting were ramped up from the previous years, but without that sense of fun, which Horror Nights desperately needed within a show this year. The lack of a second show really affected the overall feel and crowds of the event this year, and an extra house did not go anywhere near close enough to offset the crowds. Overall, this year's scare zones were not perhaps my favourite, but by no means were the worst, with the busy crowds and lack of a second show really affecting the outside portion of the event this year. Some special highlights though did exist, and I hope the event continues to grow on what it built this year to provide a world-class experience in the streets. Where it did shine though this year was in its 10 houses.
There's a CEO walking around here. You don't listen to him.
Okay.
He's not the boss.
No?
Chucky is.
Join us again next time on Expedition Haunt as we take a closer look at them. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.